Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this week's video, we are going to take a look at how you can learn any synth. And I say any, but it's any subtractive synth. So you might have you might have purchased a new plugin, you might have got yourself a new hardware synth, or you just downloaded Ableton, Logic, or another DAW, and you open up a synth and you're like, these presets are really cool, but how do I get that sound out of my head and into the synth? So for this video, we are going to use the Trigon 6. Full disclosure, I work for Novation, which is like a sister company of Sequential. So they sent me this. I'm going to learn this synth, and we have like a little meetup, and I'm going to showcase this synth to some people. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to show how I'm learning this synth. The only thing that I have looked at the user guide for was how to initialize a preset. That was it. It wasn't just a single button, so I just looked that up. The rest of it, I just kind of had to play around and use the same techniques I use for every time I get a new plugin or hardware synth. So I just wanted to cover a couple of things before we get stuck in. This isn't going to be a review. I work for the company. It's going to be a little disingenuous if I just said, hey, this synth is awesome because I work for them. It's not really a good sort of thing to just promote it. I do like it, but honestly, my opinion doesn't count. It's if you like it, and you should go and try it for yourself. If you do want a good review, I'm going to leave a link. Loopop has done a phenomenal review going through everything on this synth. If you are looking for a review, I would check that out. That guy crushes it. It's always very unbiased, and yeah, I think that that's the way to go. So with all that said, let's get into the fun stuff. So what is a subtractive synth? Well, on most subtractive synthesis, you'll have a oscillator section. So this would be the sound generation. We'll have a filter section, and we'll have a amplifier section, and then added bonus, we'll just have this LFO section over here. We obviously have other bells and whistles like aftertouch. We have some effects over here. We have an arpeggiator and some of these other effects here. But the basis of a subtractive synth is just going to have sound generation and a filter filtering out those sounds. So to help understand this synth or any synth, you're going to want to understand the signal flow. Obviously, this is going to start off, as I spoke about before, we're starting off with the oscillator section, going into a mixer. So the mixer is kind of built in here. We have the volumes here, and then we have the volume for the noise here as well. That then goes into a filter, and then from the filter, we have this envelope that we can use to modify this filter, but then from there, it's going into an amplifier section and then out to your ears. So how does that sound with just one oscillator? So let's go and initialize the preset. Whoa, other way around. There we go, we've got initialize preset. So let's turn all of our sound sources down. Let's open the filter all the way. Let's have the sustain all the way. Make sure the attack's down. And then for the amplifier, we'll have the sustain all the way and then the attack all the way down. So that just gives us no sound. So we'll turn the volume up on one oscillator. So there we go. We got this one oscillator. This is the sound source, the oscillator going into the mixer. You can choose different wave shapes, or you can do a combination. For now, we'll just keep it as sawtooth. From the mixer, we're going to go into the filter. So you can see there, as I open and close the cutoff. And then from the filter, we go into the amp. So let's pull the sustain, decay, attack, and everything down for the amplifier. Now you can just hear, we got that little click. If I open up the sustain, we start to get that sound, open a little bit of release. And there we go. We have just taken a sound source, being the oscillator, gone into the mixer, into the filter. No modulation on the filter just yet. We just have the cutoff all the way open. And then we have the amplifier where the sustain is full and we have a little bit of release. So there you go. There is the basics of the signal flow on this synth, and for the majority of synths. It'll be slightly different. Maybe the layout's going to be slightly different. As you can see on the peak, we go from the oscillator into the mixer, which is separate, into the filter, and then into the amplifier. So now that we've looked at the oscillator and the mixer section, the sound generation, we want to look at the filter. Now the filter's really good because we can then shape the sound. We can make it a little bit more dull. We can give it more bass frequencies by cutting out those highs. We can also make it a slow attack, so give it more of a pad feel, or we can make it more plucky to be used as a bass, or maybe like an arpeggiated line or something like that. And this is where the subtractive part of the synth comes along, because we are subtracting away the sound to get the desired effect. So let's look at the filter. At the moment, we just have just a low pass with no resonance and no envelope on it. So no modulation going to that sound. So if we want to make a more of a plucky sort of sound, we can start by pulling down the cutoff all the way, and then we can increase this envelope amount. And this envelope amount will be this envelope along here. So if we increase that all the way, and we'll start by pulling all of these down to 0. So now, even though we have the sustain on the amplifier at full, because there's nothing going on with the envelope that's attached to the filter, we're not going to get any sound. So what we can do is we can start to increase this decay. And you can hear there, as we just increase the decay just a little bit. So we can also just pull this decay down. And I'm just going to turn on the arpeggiator and then hold the notes. You can hear it's a little clicky, and then as I increase the decay, that's giving the effect. This envelope is modulating this filter. If I increase the resonance, we're going to get more of a sort of spacey sort of sound. We'll pull that down for now. But imagine we've got this sound and we're like, I really like that, but it seems like there's too much of this envelope affecting it. There's too much high end. What we can do is we come along to the envelope amount and then start to pull that down. And that gives us more of a muted sort of sound, maybe what you would use for a bass. So we'll go down 1 octave. And you can hear there we're in the bass register. Increase that envelope amount and you can hear got that super bassy. But there you go. So let's take the hold off and turn the arpeggiator off. That's all well and good. Let's go back up 1 octave again. But what happens if we want it to be a pad sound with that sort of slow attack? We can increase that envelope amount all the way, and then let's increase this attack. So at the moment, and then let's increase the sustain as well. Let's go all like 3/4 on that. And then increase this attack. And that's all well and good, but you can hear it cuts off really sharp there. So let's increase that release. And there you go. We're using the filter with the envelope to change the sound in a subtractive manner to then get us the desired effect. So at a basic level, a couple of things are happening when I push down the key. We have the note on information, and then it's also sending triggers out to the two envelopes. And then this will help us shape the filter and then help us shape the amp envelope to give us a variety of sounds, not just a super simple. We can get plucks, we can get pads, we can get a myriad of sounds that will help us with our sound design down the road. We can use these envelopes to shape how the filter and the amp envelope reacts to us pushing down on the key. So to demonstrate this, let's make a couple of sounds really quick to sort of showcase what the envelopes do. And just if you're very new to synthesis or something like that, the envelope is generally made up of an attack, a decay, a sustain, and release. You might see some other different things like maybe attack, decay, and release, or attack and release for some of them. But for the most part, you'll see these four to help you shape the sounds. So let's start off with a short plucky sound. So at the moment, we just have all of these down at 0. If I bring up the decay now, nice and plucky, we can add a little bit of release on it. A little bit more release. So that gives us a nice plucky sound by just increasing the decay a little bit and then just adding some release so it doesn't just stop straight after you take your finger off the key. So next we'll look at a slow attack sound. So let's keep the release about 50% and then we'll increase this attack to about 3/4. Now if I play, and you can hear that it kind of gives you a different emotion than that plucky sound. And that can be used to kind of give you a synthetic string sound or something with just a little bit more, a slower attack on the sound. And then we can look at a slow release. So I pull the attack down. Let's give it some more sustain. A little bit more sustain. And then let's increase that release. And you can hear the sound keeps traveling and then they kind of layer up on top of each other. And you get that sort of rich sound that if you were to play, instead of that, you can, to give you a sort of a different feel. Obviously you can then change that, so. And you can hear how just increasing the release will give you a different sort of feeling overall for the sound that you're trying to create. Now that we've covered just the basic fundamentals of the signal flow, the sound generation, the mixer, the filter, and the amp envelope, let's create a couple of super basic sounds to kind of utilize those. We've kind of touched on them during the video, but let's sort of look at those and how we can just go about creating a sound. So we have our, let's pull that down just a little bit. And let's make it a square. We're going from a square. Mixer is about 3/4. We'll go into the filter. So for the filter, let's pull that all the way down. And then let's increase the amp envelope to full. Now, we just have that click, so we can increase the decay here. Gives us a nice plucky bass. Increase the release. Maybe increase that decay a little bit. And pull back the release a little bit. Now, that sounds pretty decent for just like a quick, short, plucky bass. But again, like we talked about before, there's too much of the sound coming through. So let's back off this amp envelope. Let's go down 1 octave because we want to be in that bass register. Let's put the arpeggiator on, put the hold on. And then let's just there we go. Now we have that sound playing, we can kind of dial it in a little bit more. A little bit less decay, a little bit less release, and then let's add a little bit of resonance on that filter. We can come to the amp now, pull that sustain down, maybe up a little bit. And I'm just going through the two here. We've got the filter envelope and the amp envelope just to get a sound that I'm generally happy with. Maybe back off that resonance a little bit. And I think that's pretty decent there. We have a nice sort of plucky bass going on. Just using one oscillator, we got one square wave into the filter and into the amp envelope, and away we go. So next up, let's look at making a 2 oscillator synth. So for this, we're going to start off with a triangle. Actually, let's open everything back up again. Got triangle for the bass, but we can go down 1 octave. So now we're in that really bassy register. We're going to put a square on top. And then obviously we want to go into the mixer, so I'm going to pull the first oscillator down, the triangle, just a little bit. And now let's go over to the filter. I don't want any, actually, let's have the amp envelope, but then let's pull the cutoff down. Just opening that sustain a little bit on the amp envelope. And then again, it's a little bit too bright. So let's use this the envelope amount rather, to then take off some of that higher frequency. Oh, still got the arpeggiator on. And there we go, 2 oscillators into the mixer, into the filter with a little bit of envelope on the filter, and then into the amplifier, and then obviously to our ears. Now that we've made some sounds, we've kind of got the basics of what's going on, now we can look at one of the other modulators to then shape the sound a little bit more and give a bit more movement overall, and that is going to be this LFO section. So we can utilize this to shape any of these parameters here. So frequency, we got pulse width, filter, and then the amp. For mine, for this patch, I am going to use the LFO to control the pulse width on oscillator 1. So let's go make a square. Let's go full. And then we have this pulse width here. So if I move it by hand, you can hear that sound changing. But again, I'm super lazy and I don't want to do it by hand. I want to use something within the synth to shape that. So we've got a basic sound that we're like. Let's go over to here. We're going to choose pulse width 1, for that's the pulse width on oscillator 1. And then let's increase the amount to full. And you can hear it going there if I change the frequency. And you can hear it gets so narrow that the sound like just kind of stops dead. So let's back off the amount a little bit. Now we got some good movement there. Now what I'm going to do is just change the amount so it's not so crazy. Actually, before I do that, we also have these different wave shapes that we can use for the modulation. At the moment, it's a triangle. We can use the sawtooth, where it cuts out to nothing. Reverse saw. Square is going to give us on and off. And then random. I like triangle because it's the smoothest. Let's back off the amount to about 50% and increase that frequency. So we're getting a nice movement there. Now that we've used this modulation source with the oscillator into the mixer, we can then come along to the filter. Let's pull the filter all the way down and then use the amp envelope. And then use the amplifier at the end. Decay all the way down. Sustain all the way up. We want that nice rich sort of sound. Nice mana release on the end there as well. So there we go. We've just used this LFO to modulate the pulse width into our patch. Another thing that we can use the LFO for is an effect. So to show a simple effect, we can increase the noise. So this is going to be the sound source and the mixer in one. It gives us, let's turn that off, a super simple white noise sound. We can pull the cutoff all the way down. Gives us a little click. We'll go to our LFO section. We turn on filter. And then you can hear it a little bit there. We can you can hear as I move that. And then obviously if we go through some of the other wave shapes, like sawtooth. So there you go, there's some other uses for the LFO into the filter to give us some sort of different effects and stuff like that. So that's about it for today. That's how I go about learning a new synth, is I'll just start with the basics, obviously starting with sound source, mixer, filter, into an amp, and then out. And then by learning this, I'm obviously learning the signal flow. And then once I've kind of started creating a couple of super basic patches, I will then go from there and then start to look at the modulation sources and how I can utilize those to create the sounds that I have in my head and learn the synth deeper and then kind of find out more about it, so then how I can utilize it in my own productions. Hopefully this has shown you how I can do it, and maybe you've learned some things for yourself. And at the end of the day, hopefully this has inspired you to create something. Until next time, see you later.